Regency immediately. 3 sky bridges fell in. Sky bridges holding people from the 3rd floor fell and crushed.
Okay. On the night of July 17th, 1981, around 2,000 people were having a blast at a dance party at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Kansas City, Missouri, totally unaware that their lives were about to change forever. According to survivors, the most terrifying moment of this nightmare experience was the 2 seconds after the 2 atrium skywalks fell on the crowd.
And it immediately smelled like death.
Then all chaos broke loose.
As soon as I opened up the door, I saw just people screaming, moaning, and groaning.
Hundreds of people were crushed under more than 70 tons of concrete, steel, and glass, shattering the lives of countless families in a tragedy that Kansas City will never forget. But for survivors and rescuers, the nightmare had just begun. How many people were trapped under the debris? Why were rescuers deeply traumatized during the operation?
I remember one of my buddies trying to help this man. He was pulling and pulled his arm off.
And who was responsible for this outrageous tragedy? In 1978, Kansas City was buzzing with excitement as they broke ground for construction of the new Hyatt Regency Hotel. The hope was that it would bring a wellspring of new jobs and tourism to the city. 2 years later, the skyline was transformed by the 40-story modern and elegant hotel. But it was the bold architecture in the lobby that would etch the building's name into the history books. 3 massive 40-meter skywalks connected both sides of the hotel, leaving visitors in awe. The Hyatt Regency opened its doors in 1980, and by the summer of 1981, it was packed with guests. The hotel hosted dance parties on Friday evenings and invited the community to enjoy the landmark building. The parties were a huge success, drawing massive crowds every week, more than what the hotel was designed to handle. A series of structural flaws had been overlooked during construction, which happened on a very tight deadline. We'll dive deeper into that later, but first, let's explore how the victims managed to survive this harrowing ordeal. Around 7 p.m., the energy was electric. The band was performing tunes from the big band era. Hundreds of couples were tearing up the dance floor while dozens more looked on from the skywalks. A news crew was there that night to capture the popular social event. As they filmed the dancers, 2 loud bangs echoed throughout the atrium. Seconds later, 2 of the skywalks in the lobby collapsed over the crowd. As survivors attempted to flee, they began to realize the gravity of the tragedy. Hundreds of people were trapped under the debris. Among the chaos of concrete, twisted metal, and lifeless bodies, voices could be heard. Those who could still walk tried to help, but the debris was too heavy for them to rescue the trapped guests. In desperation, a survivor called 911.
Fire department. Come to the Hyatt Regency immediately. 3 sky bridges fell in.
3 what?
Sky bridges holding people from the 3rd floor fell and crushed.
Okay.
Dozens of survivors were in excruciating pain, some pinned beneath the bodies of their loved ones. Just when people thought things couldn't get any worse, the nightmare escalated. When the skywalks collapsed, they ruptured water lines, causing the atrium to flood. Trapped victims now faced an even bigger risk: drowning. Medical responders realized the situation was dire. They couldn't assist everyone. They had to focus on those whose lives could be saved. An hour after the disaster struck, a hotel engineer managed to stop the water flowing into the lobby, but it was already flooded with water and blood. The debris was too heavy for rescue teams to clear by hand. With people's lives at stake, they resorted to desperate measures, sometimes using chainsaws to amputate limbs and free survivors. The dead were brought to the ground floor exhibition area and laid out in a makeshift morgue. The hotel's lawn and driveway were set up as a triage area for the injured. Around midnight, rescuers attempted to free a young boy and his mother from the debris.
And asked him his name and how old he was. He told me he was 11 years old. And it struck me at the time because my own son is 11.
Finally, around 2 a.m., after more than 6 hours of being buried under tons of concrete, 11-year-old Dalton Grant and his mother were rescued.
They pulled me out through that little hole, and everybody stopped what they were doing, and the whole lobby started to applaud. I think because they had pulled out a little bit of life out of a whole lot of death.
But for others, the horror was far from over. Mark Williams had been buried under a massive concrete slab for over 8 hours when he felt the powerful hit of a jackhammer. The pain was excruciating.
And I'm yelling, "Hey, don't run that jackhammer anymore." I'm not just yelling, I'm cussing. I'm using cuss words that have never even been invented.
More than 9 hours after the catastrophe began, he was the final person rescued from the rubble. In the end, first responders only managed to save 24 people from the debris. They recovered 114 bodies. Their own lives were changed forever. Many grappled with post-traumatic stress disorder, and without proper treatment, some turned to alcoholism, drug abuse, and depression.
I remember one of my buddies trying to help this man. He was reaching, trying to help this man, and he literally, as he was helping him, he was pulling and pulled his arm off, and he just dropped it and then just ran out of there. And I remember there was a lot of officers, paramedics, firemen that left the careers after that.
As the city began to grieve for the dead, a question arose. Who was responsible for the tragedy? Federal investigators arrived 3 days later and launched a thorough investigation, discovering that the accident was caused by a last-minute structural change. Instead of suspending all 3 skywalks from the roof independently for maximum support, the engineers revised the plan to have the second-floor skywalk hanging from the fourth-floor skywalk. They wanted a clean look, as if the skywalks were floating in the air. But with all the weight of 2 skywalks being held up by 3 thin pairs of rods bolted to the roof, it was a disaster waiting to happen. With an unreasonably tight deadline, construction was fast-tracked to completion. The Hyatt even had a partial roof collapse during the build. Investigators found that the skywalks couldn't even support 1/3 of the weight they were holding that night. Architect Jack D. Gillum and head engineer Dan Duncan, responsible for the design flaw, had their licenses revoked but were never criminally charged. The Hyatt Regency paid approximately $140 million in reparations to the victims. But according to sources close to Hallmark, the company that owned the hotel, the total cost of the settlements and litigation was around $4.5 billion. One positive outcome of the tragedy is that authorities implemented stricter inspections and construction guidelines. It also changed the way first responders approach tragedy. Now, after operations like this one, counseling is mandatory for first responders to help them cope with PTSD. In 2015, 34 years after the disaster, survivors built a memorial to honor the victims of this tragedy. Unfortunately, this isn't the only tragedy caused by a simple oversight. In 1995, an American Airlines plane crashed into the Andes Mountains due to a basic mistake made by the pilots. Only 4 people survived, but they had a bigger struggle ahead: the unforgiving weather of the mountains. We'll find out how they made it out alive on another episode of How to Survive.